Hey, what's up guys? So I read Gary Vaynerchuk's book Crushing It, and it kind of pissed me off, just a little. So I decided to make this video reviewing that book, and I just want to make it clear before I get started, I am a big Garyvee fan. I still am a big Garyvee fan, but hear me out. To give you guys a little bit of context, I am not a big reader. I hardly ever read books. The last time I read a book was about 5 years ago in 2015 when I went through a little phase where I read like maybe 5 or 6 books that I could find for free. And it was because at the time, Tai Lopez was all over YouTube and I actually really looked up to him. And a lot of you guys might think that sounds insane because I think nowadays everybody knows about Tai Lopez's like sketchy business practices. And I know it might sound like I'm kind of getting off on a tangent, but I swear this ties into what I'm about to tell you about this book right here. Tai Lopez put out a lot of valuable content about entrepreneurship and finance when he was just getting big online. However, I always kind of kept him at an arm's length because I knew that his motive was selling courses. And being skeptical is just kind of in my nature. I never paid for one of his courses, so I can't really speak on those. However, I found a lot of value in the free content that he put out, and it changed my mindset completely. When I heard about Garyvee, that reservation that I had with Tai Lopez wasn't really there so much. The thing that I liked about Garyvee is that there was no apparent ulterior motive tied to the content that he was putting out. For example, he wasn't pushing a course. I figured he was making enough money with VaynerMedia and his other companies, and he was already rich. I guess he was making money from his talks and his book sales, but he was never like hard selling them to his audience. And that was always something that I liked about him, as well as the fact that he preaches positivity, motivation, and dedication. So I'm gonna break this video up into what I did not like about this book and what I did like about this book. So first, let's go over what I did not like so much about Crushing It by Garyvee. First of all, this book is 263 pages. It could honestly probably be condensed into 50 pages. I think a lot of the time Garyvee says a lot without saying anything, and this book is no exception. He has a lot of teens and young adults who look up to him, and a lot of the time I feel like he's feeding them this idealistic BS instead of actionable advice. Check out this video that I saw the other day that I just had to save.
Yo, what's good, Gary? It's 24K Golden here. I got a question for you today, right? So I already got the jewelry, the house, the cars, the clothes, that kind of stuff. And I realized there's no point in getting any more. Now is the time to get assets for the future. So my kids and my kids' kids and my kids' kids' kids hopefully will have the ability to live a fulfilled life. So what do you recommend putting this new money I'm getting towards, and how can I make it stretch for the future? Thanks.
24, what's good? Listen, this is a game of self-awareness. You obviously followed your intuition and your passion, and you made it happen in the music game, which is super hard. Whether it's real estate, whether it's starting a direct-to-consumer brand, whether it's starting a coffee shop, whether it's starting an apparel business, whether it is a million other things, the right answer to this question to all of you who've hit a little bit and are trying to figure out how to create wealth instead of being rich, I still think it's an awareness game of what are you actually good at? What do you know? What do you like? You want to do art? You want to do sports cards? You want to start a business? You got a buddy who's really great at making this sauce, and so you're going to start a direct-to-consumer sauce brand? Self-awareness.
You see what I mean? Like, self-awareness? Are you kidding me? That is not an answer. This young guy came to Gary for advice, and Gary gave him an answer that didn't answer anything. You know that there's an actual mathematical answer to that question? Like an actual concrete answer? Graham Stephan made a video about this the other day. You put X amount of money into the market to live off the interest, and just apply that to future generations. That guy, 24 Karat or whatever his name was, he already knew what his thing was. I don't know why Gary was talking about opening a coffee shop. That guy knew what his thing was. It was music. And I think Gary kind of does that to avoid taking responsibility for what he says. For example, if Garyvee says, to succeed at your thing, you must do X, Y, Z. And then if someone comes to him and says, hey Gary, I did X, Y, and Z and it didn't work, then you see how there's like some responsibility associated with him for giving specific advice. However, if Gary says, to succeed at your thing, you must be self-aware, and then if someone comes back to him and says, hey Gary, I was self-aware and it didn't work, that's a very abstract thing, and he could say, oh no, you thought you were self-aware but you weren't. Or he could say, no, that wasn't really your thing. You need need to figure out what your thing is. See how there's a little bit less accountability for telling somebody something like you need to be self-aware? So another thing about this book is that a good 40% of this book is testimonials for the previous book that he put out in like 2009, which was called Crush It. And I mean, I get it. Using these kinds of testimonials is kind of like his way of providing evidence that his ideas actually work. But maybe just have a handful in there. You don't need to have tons of them. It almost got to the point where I started wondering if having these testimonials in his book was some kind of marketing ploy to get these other business owners on social media to promote his book to their followers because they were featured in it, or if maybe there was some kind of social media contest to get featured in Gary Vee's book. Next, Gary talks about authenticity a lot in his book, and I learned some things that I didn't know. One, if you know Gary, you probably know that he worked in his dad's liquor store, and the way I've kind of heard him talk about it makes it sound like he was scraping by on minimum wage while growing that business, when in reality that liquor store was already a $4 million business before Gary had anything to do with it. And then he grew that business from 4 million to 45 million, and then to 60 million. I'm not sure if Gary was actually responsible for the 45 million to 60 million. It was kind of unclear in the book. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that the liquor store was already successful, and while Gary was growing the liquor store, he was taking a $60K salary. I mean, who else do you know who's working at a liquor store earning $60K a year? And I mean, I'm sure he worked his butt off, but why is this the first time that I'm kind of hearing about this? Plus, this was over 10 or 12 years ago because his Crush It book came out in 2009, so it was definitely before that. And let's go ahead and take a look at our inflation calculator. So I'm putting in 2008, but it's probably actually years before that. So 60K in 2008 would be like 72K in 2020. His dad's business, which was worth 4 million in, let's just say 2008 again, that would be close to 5 million in 2020. So basically he was working at his dad's $5 million business and taking a $72,000 salary. I think a lot of people realize that it's a lot harder to go from 0 to 4 million than it is 4 million to 45 million. I think all the really hard work was already done, but hey, what do I know? I'm not an expert. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm hating either. I mean, 4 million to 45 million is insane. Like, that is a crazy accomplishment. But it definitely wasn't this like rags to riches kind of situation that he makes it sound like on social media. But let's go ahead and look back at that 60K salary. Did you know that today VaynerMedia is paying its employees about half of that in New York City? There's this video by Joshua Fluke where he goes and kind of critiques Gary Vee's office. It's in this series that he does, it's called Corporate Cringe. And in that video, he shows some job listings by VaynerMedia, and they're posting that their creator positions pay a $32,000 salary. You can barely afford to rent a studio apartment in NYC for that. And these are people with a specialized skill set. So why don't we ever hear about that type of authenticity? I mean, he calls this book a business book. Why don't we hear about the details of his business in this book? And Joshua Fluke is actually the guy who kind of got me to pull the trigger and buy this book and read a book for the first time in 5 years, because in that video he stated that this is the book that helped him grow his YouTube channel to what it is today. Although by the time I was almost done reading this book, I had to message Joshua on Instagram because I started wondering if maybe I ordered the wrong book. And he actually confirmed that, yeah, it was this book, Crushing It. And also this book talks kind of a lot about Shonduras, and he's a really cool guy. I've also known about him for a long time. And it talks about how he got big on Snapchat and how he started an online jewelry business. But if I'm not mistaken, didn't Shonduras use his girlfriend's like pictures or name or something on Facebook to start the jewelry business so people would think that it was a female running the jewelry business? Why was that huge detail left out from the book? Was it because it went against the overall theme of authenticity? I don't know. And it got me thinking, I know Shonduras, but what is being left out from the stories of all these other people in the book that I've never heard about? I feel like we're lacking a little bit of transparency there. And I know I've already said a lot, but I'm almost done talking about what I did not like about the book. But check this out. In my opinion, the valuable information in this book starts around here, a little bit over halfway through the book. I feel like the first half of the book was, of course, a lot of testimonials, but also almost trying to convince me that social media is important to grow your business or your personal brand. Like, I already agree with that. That's why I'm reading this book. I just want to get to the information. You don't have to convince me. And just jumping back to the Tai Lopez thing really quick, I remember this one thing that Tai Lopez said one time. He was saying that for a lot of these kinds of books, you can get away with reading like the first page and the last page of every chapter because a lot of the information in between those pages is just filler. And that's exactly like what I thought about when I was reading this book. And the reason that a lot of books are like that is because booksellers or publishers or whatever, they can't sell a book that's only like this thin. Now let's move on to what I actually liked about this book. And while it sounds like there was a lot that I didn't like about this book, there was actually a lot that I did like, and I actually got a lot of value out of it. For one, Gary talks about this thing called pillar content, and it's pretty much like having one big piece of content that you could splinter off into smaller pieces of content to post to different social media platforms like Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. So basically, instead of creating like 20 different small pieces of content, you just create one big piece of content, and then from that one big piece of content, you make a bunch of little pieces of content. And it's kind of a way of thinking about social media that I never thought of before. And I actually recommend that everybody looks into that. You know, I'm sure you could find that information online. And another thing that I found value in is that it helped me actually identify some mistakes that I myself am making with social media. Like, one thing that I was doing is I was trying to use all my other social media to try to funnel traffic to my YouTube channel, when what I really should have been doing is trying to grow a native audience on each of those other platforms, because that'll work in favor of the algorithm. For example, Instagram wants people to stay on Instagram, Twitter wants people to stay on Twitter. That's ultimately like how they make their money. And the book also gave some really good information on how to succeed on TikTok, which actually in the book was referred to as Musical.ly or Musical.ly, however you say it. And of course, one of the other things that I really liked about the book is that it's classic Gary Vee. It reinforces that standard of the level of dedication and hard work it takes to build your personal brand, which makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside because it gives me a sense of hope. Anyways, guys, I could nitpick at this book all day, but in the end, I don't want to discourage anybody from reading this book. I think there's a good amount of valuable information in here, and I do think it's worth a read. My main criticism is that it could have been condensed quite a bit, but in the end, it was still good. I'll leave the Amazon link for the book down in the description below in case you want to check it out, as well as all of my social media links. I'm pretty active on Instagram especially, and if you like this video or if this video helped you out, I would appreciate it if you went down there and gave this video a like. That would help me out so much. And if you'd like to see more videos by me in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and also hit that bell notifications button. And I will talk to you guys in my next video. Peace.